Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Halloween special here at Purblind Gamer's Twitch stream. I hope everybody is getting into the spirit of the spooky season, because it will be gone before you know it. In fact, some might even say it has gone. I'd even say it's a couple of weeks gone.
Then why are we only doing the Halloween special in November?
Quite possibly, Airplane Lion, because we were busy with other things in October, namely trying to get you to be quiet. I am death. I am death for the next few minutes, until it gets too difficult to see through this mask, and I take it off. But, as everybody knows, Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, and I try to do a Halloween special, even though this year's will be a little bit shorter, because life's full of stuff, and I was still finishing and rewriting parts of the story tonight, or this evening, I may say charitably. Is it a mess? Quite probably. Oh, and you guys, please go check out Thanatos13 Official. Oops. How are you tonight, Thanatos? And as I always say, thank you to everybody who came out to my last couple of streams. On yesterday, we played a couple of games for Short Horror Saturday, including Bloody Scream, which was pretty wild. And before that, well, it's mostly been Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. Oh yeah, my pleasure, Thanatos. And in a bit of change of plans, since we're so late, and, looking at the story and how long the story was last year, it'll probably take me an hour and a half to read through the story itself. So, instead, we won't be finishing Shadow's Price for Our Sins tonight, because I can see that puzzle taking us a good hour or so. Instead, we'll just play a quick round of a nice arcade game as we wait for people to come in, since I am a little bit later than I said I would be. Sorry about that. My life is a mess. And then we'll jump right into the horror story. And then we'll get to the yearly Halloween game. What game is it this time? Well, my followers on MySpace know, but they've been instructed not to tell the general public or my followers on Twitter. So I guess we'll all just have to find out. Unless, of course, you follow me on MySpace. Then you know. Oh, nice, Thanatos. You were doing a part of a charity stream the other day. I've never done that before. 15 others. Wow, that's a pretty big stream. A pretty big charity event. Like, what were you guys playing? To start with, we'll just play a quick round of Destruction Carnival, that favorite of mine that I'll beat on stream one of these days. Virtually real. Oh, you were playing Sonic X Shadow Generations. Hey, Captain Falco, welcome in. Happy Halloween. Happy belated Halloween. How are you? That's neat. They let you play different things. Oh, the game is loud. Thanks. Weird, I thought. Well, then, it's been a while since I last played it. Also, some of these MIDI files are longer, or louder than others. You know, freeware games of the mid-90s. I almost replayed the Destruction Army of Darkness game, which served as a prototype for this, but I couldn't find it. Maybe it's on my laptop. I thought I uploaded it to Clicktopia, but maybe I didn't. They're flexible about what you play, whether it's indie or not. Wave 1. Let's make some gravy. Some ancient gravy? This game isn't exactly horror in the strictest sense, but I just wanted something quick to start with as a warm-up, and didn't want to waste time forever looking for a new game. And you know, one of the bosses is a giant skeleton, and you shower his eyeballs in showers of gore, so I'll allow it. Wave 2. Is that a laser rifle here? Are you just happy to see me? I might be happy to see you if you did not have a laser rifle in your pocket. But they're probably happy to see me because they want to kill me. Oh shoot, again. Down at 20. Pause it after this level. Audio is so obnoxiously imprecise. When I first played this, I didn't realize you could like strafe. Apparently it's good to read instructions sometimes. Also possible with something in front of my mouth. I'm not as loud as usual. Because you know how loud I usually am. Loudmouth Davey, they call me. There. Hopefully now. Okay, it's being weird. Jeez. There. Cut it in half. Wave 3. Come to Papa. It's okay, we can still make this work. Also find it harder when the levels where the background's lighter. Definitely want that. It's a really good game. Especially compared to a lot of the other stuff that was being put out at the time. Brains. I haven't eaten brains yet, have I? One of these days I will. Animal brains, of course. Unless I get zombified. Takes longer, but it's a lot safer if you keep 4 of the brains alive without their glass spheres. Hey, Yak, welcome in. Oh, you know. I am purblind. Well, perhaps I'm just deaf, and most of the year I pretend to be purblind. Hey, background, welcome in. And you know, I haven't actually watched Squid Game. Played a couple of video games with squids. Night of the Cephalopods, Calamari Cubes. Did somebody dress like that this in the Squid Game? Classy. But, you know, considering I've been dressing like this since middle school, I did it first. Yes. The old pause when the MIDI restarts. I well remember that from Windows 95. How many lives have we lost to that throughout our lives? Oops. It's my least favorite power-up. Horus. Yeah, definitely Robotron inspired.
I will crush you!
Thank you, Horus. One of the best Robotron clones out there, if you ask me. Dear. Better than nothing, I reckon. Yeah, we don't want to be crushed by Horus, the pugnacious cackety. A lot of games would have ripped the sprites, but not Agent Gravy. Or virtually real, I guess. Game real? They call it. Well, that's certainly not suitable for children. Yeah, it really is. Great backlog. I love Destruction Carnival. Bonus stage. Flaming Death Balls. 1-up. Control key. Wave 1. Hey kids, eat your vegetables and get plenty of sleep. Well, I eat my vegetables. I'll give myself that. The other thing, that's what vacations are for. See a mine there. I did not. We must be here. Oh really? This is from F-Zero. Wave 2. I stepped in something icky. Yeah, I think most of these minions are from video games. It was pretty common back in like click and play games to do. Have the music be from like video games or movies. Sometimes you get some nice classical music there. Wave 3. Give me some sugar, baby. I don't know, this was it was made by Click and Play, so it was a freeware Windows game. I don't know. So I guess it was, I associate more with Windows 95, but I guess it was technically Windows 3.1. And it's got, and I have to run it through OTVDM because it's one of those lovely 16-bit executables which so befuddle Windows 10. Actually, anything past 8, I think. I think Windows 7 can still handle. Windows 10 is no Windows 7, but it's also no Windows 8, let's be real. Yeah. You would find these on shovelware CDs sometimes, or on Angel Fire websites. GeoCities websites. BBSs, I imagine, but you know, I've never actually been to a BBS, I don't think. Sure ain't fixing to start up now. I want skulls. I think it is now. I've got a big alien in my pants. Because it's like, it's probably the best game made with the click and play system, so the daily click, which I think is the most current, like, big quick game website. I mean, for current stuff. Like, has it archived on there. And of course, it's on Clicktopia too. Oh, yeah, it might be on the archive as well. That's a nice one. Old Windows games make their way there. I'm thinking, I've heard that death shout before, but maybe it's just from playing this. Which site's video library wasn't archived? Oh, that one, right. VEOH. Yeah, I forgot about that. Hey, Zatar, welcome in. Well, before we get to the real stream, we're just warming up with a couple rounds of Destruction Carnival, and we're trying to save ourselves. Sites can just disappear, and who knows what happened to all the videos. Eddington.
I've got a bone to pick with you.
Yeah, well, looks like you're a bit short in the bone department, Mr. Head Only. Looks like he hasn't been doing so well since Deep Space Nine ended, if you know what I'm saying. It seems though I'm some Star Trek authority. Oops. Well. Usually my first run of the day isn't my best, but that's enough for tonight. He rattles. Yeah, one bone short of a body. Rattles, that's fun. But now, it's time to move on to the main part of our stream. Every year, I write an original horror story to read on Twitch for Halloween. And I have to say, this year's isn't as good as the other, like, 3 times I've done it. I say this is a tradition that's been going on for years. But not everything we write can be a winner. Oops. And I should take this off. I'll put it back on at the end of the stream. Wow. Brightness much. Besides, now I can drink water. You can drink bottles of beer through that thing. It's got a mouth, but drinking from a glass, harder. It was purblind all along. Which reminds me, I gotta check out that new Agatha TV show. You know, I love the other Agatha TV shows, like Death on the Nile, Bertram's Hotel, and Then There Were None. There might be more than one Agatha out there. Anyway, this is Sammy Boots is the name of this horror story. Arguably horror sci-fi story. Arguably just weird fiction story that I've written. And what I'm going to do is... Oh wait, let me turn on the... trigger warning. Call it that. But just to let people know, I won't be responding to chat because I have TTS off. So yeah. And yeah, I imagine this will take about an hour, so I'll catch up on chat after that. If we get like a raid or something, I'll pause. Wait. Turn off TTS. Thanks. God, too many tabs open. Story of my life. My brain did it before the internet had the technology. Well, the browsers had the technology, I guess. That's okay, we just opened multiple windows. It's going to be easier if I invert the colors in zoom text. Excuse me. You guys will hear me pushing that. God, I'm congested. Only when I'm about to start reading something. Sammy Boots. What makes a man himself? Your scientists of certain specialized disciplines will give answer, meeting the question from the direction of mind or from the question of genetic theory, converging to pry the right to answer from the clutches of philosophers and theologians. Those in any of these camps with the sense that someone or something gave them may acknowledge that the right must be shared between several factions, or, if it can be proven that it rests solely in the ownership of one, then the fact won't become known within our children's lifetime. As a disabled man, benefiting daily from technology that was blurred speculation or hypothesis in the year of my birth, I can in no way minimize the sorties knowledge has made into the land of ignorance. I will say the territory we surveyed and deemed our own encompasses not so large a portion of the whole as we would like to think. For we have no map save what we make as we go, square by square on our ruled pages, as might an engineer draw while playing a 1980s computer game that offers no sight nor sound nor anything except a sentence telling him he has hit another wall. I, if I may continue my archaic but strangely pertinent conceit, which I may return to by and by, have made a turn or two that none other has, and been advised of wall here and passage there in the most dispassionate and unilluminating of terms. Don't look to me for an explanation that fits our natures, and our nature within the universe, onto a neat little card in an orderly file. I can tell you what happened to us, but never the process inducing Sammy Boots to act as Sammy Boots would act, or what made me take certain of my own actions. You may know her name, may have read something about Sammy, and seen the name connected to my own or not. Any who have, those who accept what they read as much as those who reject it, will in all probability share the conclusion that Sammy Boots doesn't exist. I can follow each reasoning in deciding so. You're wrong, though. I spent pleasant hours with that woman. I followed trails that I found wiped preternaturally clean, and I will swear to the existence of Sammy Boots. I will also remind myself that what befell the woman was not my fault and was inevitable by the time I met her, which, for all that, I never actually did. It was my habit, when I reached an era of life when frequent social interactions with friends grew more difficult and necessitated more planning or seeking than they had on the heels of disruptions to life, and most of my generation will understand this, to take to the bars on weekends. There I might enjoy the company of an affable set, easier engaged with than in time of sobriety, and if not quell the parade of thoughts in my head, then slow their march and direct them into more pleasant refractions or frivolous eddies wherein they could tire themselves. At several drinkeries scattered across the city, you might consider me a regular. At a few others, you might demote me to an occasional. A desire for companionship had moved me to these establishments, to be sure, but especially at those where I might be found once in multiple months, if that, I would wait for an approach to be offered more often than essay one myself, the power of nipperkin over nature having its limits. Some nights might therefore see me sitting to a side, contented enough, extending only a passing remark to a fellow imbiber or a brief chat with a bartender, until the clock's double chime provoked a change of scenery. On a night when I recognized only one bartender, the runner, and the doorman, when I could have sat quietly at the corner of the bar, I instead made conversation with a young woman. That was Sammy. She wouldn't always look as she did then, but I can describe how she appeared too easily, as I've pulled it from my mental files for review much too often. She was a blonde, complexion and shade of hair both faintly on the darker side, of average height, late 20s at a guess, a clever-looking girl. That suited her. A clever-looking grin. That suited her personality. Very attractive, without attaining the glamour of a movie star, such as would make her conspicuous and guarantee her relentless attention. She was laughing with vigor as another lass of about her age rose from a seat near her and left the immediate area with annoyance enough that any friendship they had was plainly not to be renewed that night. Her apparel, naturally, drew the eye in a way that she herself would not, because it bore greater difference from any ready article of comparison. In a button shirt, I was dressed much smarter than the lock and sham expected of its customers, but Sammy? Not contented with a formal and professional skirt and blouse, she had a loud coat with stripes a hair too wide that at one time belonged to a man's three-piece suit and at this time belonged to nowhere whatsoever. To complete her defiant picture, she had perched on her head a brown felt hat of a 1940s style, much battered and aged. She looked like she'd been playing some character on the stage. I took possession of a pint I had just ordered, left my card with the man, and strolled in a direction calculated to pass near Sammy, with my curiosity politely veiled, the pint unable to do me much good while still in a glass. Sammy's eyes found mine with unabashed frankness, so I wished her a good evening, and chased it with some forgettable words about her outfit. "Well, fellow, it seems you and I both find ourselves alone, and in the market for a solid natter. Sit down, sit down." She spoke with an easy assurance and a peculiar speech pattern. I laughed as I pulled out a stool to join her at the tall table, yet faced with her grin and coat and performative style of address, I couldn't be sure how much of it was a joke. This did not bother me greatly, as both company and entertainment here presented themselves in agreeable form. I accepted the seat with thanks. "Of course. What's that you're drinking?" I named a Belgian beer, priced very reasonably at the time, that filled my glass. "Don't believe I've heard of that. Me, I'm a sloe gin spritz girl. Always have been. Not to say every bar in this city knows how to mix it up right. I communicated that, were I a bartender, my place of employment would match her description, as I had never heard of the brew before. Well, there are so many out there, we'll never learn them all. What's your name? David. I extended my hand. It sure is great to meet you, David. She reached across the table to shake my hand, and to linger hers on it longer than strictly necessary. You can call me Sammy Boots. Sammy Booten, if you read my license or ask my parents, but I'm just Sammy Boots. An unusual nickname, I laughed. One that pertains to your choice of footwear? You would think so. Nope, not unless it's pouring rain or I'm on a hike. So, it's my first night checking out this dive. You part of the regular crew here? I thought now I'd placed her style of speech. It was like that of the old motion pictures, a manufactured accent no longer to be found in nature, spoken by this amusing young woman in the present day. I'm not, I admitted, though hardly unknown. I'm not, I admitted, though hardly unknown, making my way here once every couple of months. More often, you'll find me drinking along the waterfront. Water, water everywhere. But stronger still is my drink, I finished with neat enough dovetail that the imperfections of my alternative text were forgiven, evidenced by her laugh. I might drink here more often if I had like-minded friends, but my roommates will average a pint a week, and 4 out of each 5 of those is taken at home in front of the television. Same as my girlfriends. Not a gargle goblin amongst them. For all I wanted to just have a high night out in the bar, they wouldn't have it. So they're gone, left me, discarded as this old piece of trash. To place emphasis on a point that needed none, she took off her hat and flicked it away to catch on the corner of an unoccupied booth's partition. Thrift and rummage, and not the best from my hauls. She smoothed her hair. So that leaves the pair of us to get acquainted. She raised her glass and drank, at which I seconded the motion. And action with feeling. From here, I won't give our speech in any detail, because it mostly runs in impressions and fragments now. For the drink I took was neither the evening's first, nor by any means its last. I did the greater share of the talking, contrary to habit, at Sammy's encouragement and with her rapt attention. You tell your story. I'm along for the ride, she said more than once. I'd get her talking too, as time passed us by. Sammy sold life insurance by trade. We're none of us planning to stick around forever, she chortled, an occupation that allowed her some travel, much of it within the city and to outlying towns, and afforded her some humorous, sometimes darkly so, encounters that she was happy to share. We talked much about cinema, too, and she had greater appetite for older titles. She could speak on some of the most... And though she had greater appetite for older titles, she could speak on some of the most recent, too. I could speculate how she acquired such knowledge, but once I've finished, you'll be able to do that as well as I. That Sammy was a character, or rather that she was playing a character, must seem obvious. I was not ignorant of the possibility, but was accepting. I came from years of theater, where many peers, regardless of gender or occupation, might inject the performative into the everyday as the spirit listed, or wear vintage clothing amounting practically to a costume out in the world on any given day. A young A.W. of my undergraduate swing dance club was known for this, and never once set foot on a stage. When you've interacted extensively with the spawn of Thespis and have seen them switch to Russian accents for the duration of an evening's moving of boxes, expecting you to meet the challenge, an encounter with a Sammy won't give you extensive suspicions, as long as she's clever and consistent. Besides, there was an undercurrent of earnestness that disarmed, and that suggested that this was simply how Miss Boots was. This was not an act, but a genuine person with a theatrical flair. Her declaration that she herself had performed in amateur histrionics over several years made it even easier to accept her grand and lively manner. Maybe she only said she had because I told her about my time in theater. When the clock struck 2, neither of us were disposed to say good night. We seemed to agree without speaking that nothing more than a kiss and further conversation was in order at this meeting. I was one beyond the 8 at an advanced hour on the coattails of an exhausting week, and Sammy categorized her composure as snookered like a billiard table, but not so much as to slur, even if I should. That we had formed a connection, not easily dismissed, could hardly be denied by either party. We retired to Sammy's apartment, as she was not afflicted like myself, with many flatmates and a cramped room, and after further talk, dear God, I wish I could recall it now, lazily drifted into slumber, seated on her couch, holding each other. Not so long before that point, I had my fingers in her hair, thinking of nothing of how her hat hadn't been recovered, and brushed them over a small quantity of crusty flakes, a few of which dislodged and sprinkled down her hair. It appeared to be dried blood. Sammy mumbled that she'd hit her head and would wash it away in the morning, waving away my concern. I woke in the same position, Sammy's head resting upon my shoulder. Sleep still hung heavily over her, and I tried to rouse her, and she seemed tired. So tired. Worrying she might have drunk too freely, I leaned her head down to a pillow and got her a glass of water. She wouldn't wake up for almost a minute. Then she did. She wasn't sensible. Sammy's eyes held no recognition of me, but, far worse than that, no recognition of anything. She could blink, look around, make noises with her mouth, but all without meaning or purpose. Her personality was gone. I'm glad she didn't show any fear or awareness of her affliction. I called an ambulance. Once I realized something had happened to Sammy and that I had no hope of determining what or aiding her myself in any way, my thoughts were only for getting her what help she needed. It did not bear the signs of alcohol poisoning, or concussion, or anything else that I had read of. My presence there was an awkward point, but I couldn't let it worry me. I could say with the clearest conscience that I'd done nothing wrong, and could in no way face any blame if Sammy did not make a swift recovery, but my face a measure at my own hands if she did not receive as swift a diagnosis as I could initiate. I gave as much information as I could over the telephone. The medical men arrived not 5 minutes later, an interval that I spent sitting beside her and holding her hand. To inform her family crossed my mind, but I reasoned I could do that later, and that it would be cruel to worry them when Sammy might be fine within a few hours. You said that the woman's name is Sammy Boots? Asked the ambulance driver as the other two performed checks on her and loaded her into their wagon. He had found her wallet and had been looking at it with slight confusion. Well, Samantha Booton, I believe. I told you I only met her last night. You did. She may have had her reasons for giving you that, nickname. Please, may I ride to the hospital with you? Before answering, the driver had a quiet word with one of the others, who was strapping in the gurney on which the once vibrant woman now lay in silence. Directed by the other, the driver leaned in to look at her head. Both looked back at me. Only family can ride with her and can visit. When can I come check on her? Call at the hospital in a few days, the driver returned curtly. Meantime, you gave us your name. Someone might have questions. They took Sammy and left me with a question of my own. Did they think I could have been responsible for her unaware state? It seemed impossible, until I remembered that I had no idea of its cause. In good faith, I phoned the nearest police precinct and explained what had happened in some detail. The officer I spoke to listened politely and thanked me, saying that he wasn't certain how much of my story to believe, and that if it was not entirely true or a prank, which it didn't at all sound like, a detective would reach out to me very soon. I tried for the rest of the day to find out more about Sammy, and soon regretted my failure to look around her apartment before I left. I could discover nothing about her, and the apartment was let to someone of a different name. For the first time, I wondered whether Sammy Boots was the woman's real name. After a couple of days' passage, my worry for the woman, whom I readily admit I had quite come to like in our brief acquaintance, drove me to the nearest hospital. I asked if Sammy Boots was well enough to accept visitors. The receptionist, checking the records, replied that I would be unable to visit Sammy Boots because there was no party of that name listed. Then she's been released? No, she hasn't been admitted. Are you sure you have the right hospital? I had made certain I did, and instead described Sammy's appearance and the date and circumstances under which she had been admitted. The receptionist, recognizing the patient, took a greater interest in me now. You're the man who called the ambulance. Yes, I understand that my visiting her may be impossible, but can you tell me how Sammy fares? Please take a seat. The attending physician will wish to speak with you. I assented, but wondered aloud why the patient I sought was now confirmed to remain here when the receptionist had at first told me she was not a patient. The answer was a repeat of the previous request, as the doctor was summoned. I had nearly a quarter-hour's wait before the physician, whose name was Snyder, stepped out of the elevator and crossed the room to where I sat. He was a muscular fellow, of about my years, with a harassed demeanor. He greeted me with a shake of the hand. I had hoped you might stop by, he explained, and I'm sorry to keep you waiting. The family won't give me peace, and it struck me as best that they not see me speaking to you. There's no question in my mind, he went on ere I could break in, that her sudden affliction came as a great shock to you as much as to anyone. Doctor, I must insist you tell me, is Sammy all right? Snyder hesitated. Her condition has not changed since you saw her. I don't know that it will. We're out of our depth here. I've got a top neurologist flying in this afternoon, so of course we hope that he can shed some light on your lady friend's case. I'd only met Sammy. Of course, but you were the last person to see the patient, I mean to say, when she was sensible. He placed a light emphasis on the orphaned honorific and extended the pause long enough so as to couple with his earnest gaze in bestowing an impression that he might boldly slip me something he oughtn't, depending on how I answered. How did she appear to you? Did she slur her words? Did her sentences sound jumbled? Or was her train of thought easily derailed? Not at all. We'd been drinking, of course, and were both much tired out, it being so late at the time. Nothing that would herald this, even on the threshold of slumber. I think I had it worse on both counts than her. Wait, did she mention a bump on the head? A bump? Where on the head? How did she get it? She didn't say. On the top, perhaps? I indicated roughly on my own. It didn't seem to either concern or to pain her. But could that have been the cause? Is her brain damaged? Dr. Snyder seemed to debate his response. A bump on the head wouldn't likely cause something like this. No. Were her personality and her statements about her own life consistent? Did she seem to be honest with you? She did. I did wonder if she might have been rather an exaggerated version of herself, playing it up. She had that unusual way of speaking and dressing, but I still felt I was getting to know the woman herself. She had several amusing stories from her career, as she became a life insurance salesman directly after college. Snyder held further debate within himself, but before it could be resolved, a woman's scream tore across the lobby. It's him, isn't it? He's the one! A 60-ish woman with hair beginning to gray stood in front of the elevator, murder on the surface of a face into which grief had been stamped. Snyder fumbled out a clumsy denial after his face had, in the surprise of the moment, confirmed her suspicions. "What did you do to her?" The older woman flew at me with arms out, ready to claw at me. A younger woman of around 32 was trying to grab her and haul her back. "I didn't do anything to harm Sammy, I swear," I protested, backing away and endeavoring to put a row of chairs between us. This only served to wring another howl of fury from her. "He's making fun of her! He thinks he'll get away with it!" "Mother, stop!" ordered the younger woman, who I now saw favored Sammy so greatly that they must surely have been sisters. Latching on to the other's arm and detaining her, Dr. Snyder interposed himself between me and the grieving mother. "Please go back upstairs, Mrs. Please, ma'am." So saying, Snyder motioned me towards the door. "You know what he said," the younger woman chided. I made my way towards the door, and the older woman screamed that there was no justice as long as I was allowed my liberty. The younger woman held her mother and looked at me with a sad and tired face, but noticeably absent was any bitterness or accusation. Her mother's surplus compensated for her lack. "He took my daughter from me. He did that to Maisie." "No, he didn't," Snyder snapped with the absolute firmness and certainty needed to quiet her. The assurance of his tone surprised even myself. "It is impossible. Now please, go upstairs." I assumed that the doctor and the sister were able to lead the woman back to the elevator within moments, but fled from the disturbing scene rather than watch this. My thoughts awhirl, I eagerly distanced myself from the hospital as I attempted to sift them. My initial inclination to telephone the police again I decided not to act upon, which was probably wise. Most likely, Sammy's mother wished to assuage her guilt by assigning blame where none existed, and had grasped at me as the recipient because I had been with her daughter before, or when, she became afflicted. Yet if there was any investigation against me, the police would not give me any information or find anything that I could tell them of much use. That Sammy Boots was not whom she said she was seemed increasingly likely. I phoned Snyder later that afternoon, and at least got him for all of 1 minute. After brief apologies for the scene at the hospital with an appeal to make allowances for grieving parents, he assured me that I was under no suspicion in his mind, and advised me that I should have a happier life if I could put the existence and fate of the woman I had spent the night with out of my head entirely, in facilitation whereof he would not be sharing any further information with me, and doubted we should have occasion to speak again. Snyder spoke true. I bore no responsibility for what had happened to the poor woman, but I have never been one to absolve myself as quickly and cleanly as he might. There must have been something I could have noticed that would have driven me to call for help sooner. If she hadn't spent the night talking to me, she might have spent it with someone who could have helped her, or else gone to find her girlfriends who had not accompanied her to that bar. Even without all that, damn it, I liked her. I had thought we would spend so much more time getting to know one another, and then she was gone. No, I wasn't going to put her out of my mind. Perhaps, in a way, it's a good thing I didn't. I don't know. There's a lot I don't. A return to the apartment seemed ill-advised, leaving a return to the Lock and Sham my most viable lead. I came in at 6, just after they opened, believing that Garrett, the bartender on that regrettable night, also worked on Thursdays when he wasn't working at one of several local music venues. I was only the second customer, and Garrett observed that I was some 5 or 6 hours earlier than usual. He might have laughed about it in other circumstances, but we each knew that other was in a serious frame of mind. A police detective came around, wanting to know about that young woman. Did he say what had happened to her? No, only that something had happened to her, and that she was unable to answer any questions. I told him that she spent most of her time talking with you, and that the two of you left together. He sounded very slightly embarrassed, though he'd no need to be. Even if I'd been more than a pleasant acquaintance of his, what else could he have done? I said as much, to which he nodded. Right. He didn't seem that interested in you. Seeing that his own interest exceeded that which the detective had made apparent, as he was curious, and wondered if I could have done something to hurt her, I told him my story from the time I sat down with Sammy to the moment Snyder and I said goodbye. His only interruption was to let me know that Snyder had phoned him as well, with variations of questions that he had also put to me. So, basically, you don't know what's going on with her, Garrett observed as I finished. I'm not even positive that I know her name. Did she introduce herself to you? Why? Because I want a way to know if she gets better, and I want to know what the hell I'm tangled up in. This satisfied him. She didn't, just cracked a couple of jokes when she ordered. Carlos ID'd her when she came in. He remembers because she called herself Sammy, but her driver's license didn't match. He doesn't remember what it said. He had to let her in. It was a real ID. His worry was more about external blame, where I had my hands full with internal, and we neither of us allowed any concern that our chosen variety was not particularly rational. Wait. I leaned on the bar, looking down it to where Sammy and I had paid for our drinks before leaving. We both used cards, didn't we? She must have signed for it. My excited assumption soured Garrett's mood. She's supposed to. In a perfect world. Do you know how often we'd be chasing spouses out of the door for a proper signature if we stood on that? If we get an X for some of them, we're lucky. To lighten his mood somewhat, I speculated that a large prawn smacking a bar tab out of his hand might be construed as a signature, as long as it left a mark on the paper. I took a risk that Garrett would have seen the film which I referenced, and luck was with me. We shared a needed laugh, and Garrett went to look through the receipts from that night. He commented that he wasn't supposed to show these to anyone, and that if he found it, I must have looked at it when Sammy was signing, and nobody could fault him for that. He has since consented to my telling this part of the story. Here it is, he said at last. Yep, she signed it. And? She signed it as Sammy Boots. My face fell. Which doesn't match the name on her card, Garrett pointed out. I looked and saw he was right, as the credit card of a Maisie Riley had paid for the drinks. Garrett was able to tell me nothing else of any use regarding the girl, whom he'd never seen before that night. One last thought struck him as I thanked him and was leaving. Hey, tell me if you recognize this. He stepped into the office and brought forth a battered brown felt hat. Of course I recognized it. That was hers. I'd forgotten that she tossed it away and never bothered to recover it. I'd had it in the lost and found. I don't know. I could keep it till she's better. He let the statement hang. We both knew that might not happen. Or send it to her family. His tone wanted enthusiasm. Or just donate it. In its condition, it wasn't the sort of hat that would have any value other than the sentimental. I didn't offer any thoughts on what he should do with it, as a little detail of the hat made me feel sad. Something cast away, so useless. I had the name of Maisie Riley, and a preliminary search on the internet yielded a picture that settled the matter, as the unmistakable face of Sammy Boots stared at me from the screen. None of the details of her life matched what she had told me. She was an engineer of some sort. Reading through her Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and a seldom-used WordPress, one formed a picture of an analytical woman, one who spends time at professional conferences and with her close friends. Not one who's gregarious or given to levity, and who relishes attention drawn to them in public settings. Although the picture one may draw from social media is not complete or always accurate, in her words and photographs I could find no trace of the Sammy Boots I had known, or of a woman particularly likely to play such a colossal joke on a stranger. She certainly never wore any clothing even remotely in the style of what she had worn that night. I watched these pages for either happy news or the announcement that I dreaded would come, that Maisie Riley had met with some form of accident. A week went by, neither making an appearance, and I still would not drive my concern and my curiosity from my mind. It seeming unlikely that Snyder would now be too receptive to any solicitations after his patient's welfare, and myself having no acquaintances in common, such as could be noted on her socials, with Miss Riley, I could think of no means to learn how she was short of troubling the family. I forbore until the announcement came that Miss Riley had suffered a severe accident or illness and was being held in hospital, with friends and relatives asked not to attempt visitation and to postpone sending any letters until such time as her condition might have improved. The mother would be unreceptive to any approach on my part, I fancied, but the sister, it was at least a chance, might not be. In the most halting of terms, I wrote to Miss Sarah Riley to introduce myself and offer my sympathies for whatever had befallen her sister, of whom I had formed a positive impression. I did not stress its erroneity in my brief encounter, adding moreover that she had but to say the word, and I should not trouble her again. Sarah wrote back politely, if not warmly, and with genuine appreciation for my note, occupied as she was by her own and her family's grief. The scene in the hospital lobby was apologized for all around, with dual dismissal to follow, and Sarah expressed an understanding that the fit her sister had suffered must distress me as well. She was not in a position to correspond regularly, but would be happy to exchange word now and then. I did learn that Maisie's brain had in some small way been damaged, which they took to account for her state, even though the expert neurologist could not see how it should, and that Sarah was firmly of the opinion that I could not have hurt her sister in such a way as to cause this. With many regrets expressed for a single further imposition, I asked whether the name of Sammy Boots held any meaning for Sarah, or whether she knew why Maisie might have adopted it temporarily. Sarah had never heard it before, and only assumed that her sister was in an unusual mood that night, as evidenced by earlier trips to the thrift shop for her unwanted apparel. I searched for the name through the typical channels and found them choked with the duckweed of some bootmaker whose wares accounted for 9 results on every page across all the engines. Not finding anything and thinking it unlikely that there was anything to find, I delved no deeper then. In the following year and a half, the name Sammy Boots and my disturbing encounter with the woman who used that name crossed my mind with decreasing regularity. They would not disappear, of course, any more than I would let them, which I would not, and never will, owing to the responsibility I reassigned myself as rapidly as I might disown it. I would check Maisie's pages and infrequently reach out to Sarah, and every couple of months I would find myself at the Lock and Sham, where Garrett, were he there, might make allusion to that night months distant, and receive from me a lack of update on the other party, or might limit himself to asking how I was and what I'd have. There it stood, one strange incident that was finished, and might stand so still, except for where fate directed us in our nocturnal imbibings. These, for me, were resigned almost exclusively to the weekends, but that Thursday, a minor holiday that wanted celebration, when work had been crushing me with more force than usual, of greater frivolity than usual, and promised a Friday of no more worth than the clipped amount with which I could endow it, I'd decided, hang it all, it was a night for the cups. Thrice dram-fortified against expenditure, I walked the half-mile to the Monaco, a smaller bar dating back some 70 years, and positioned on the border of the district, bereft of frills, unless one counts the analog jukebox, the coin-operated pool table, and the disposition of the lone barmaid. I was more distracted or reflective even than usual, so I had only spoken briefly to the barmaid, and one regular patron I recognized, and spared little thought to who else was there. He wasn't there when I got there. He couldn't have been. Why should I have noticed his entrance? I had popped open my third and possibly ultimate can of swanky when I heard the man laugh. My head may have whipped towards the sound when I heard it, clearly, but my brain, satisfied in the moment that the reflex arc had proven itself capable without cerebral meddling, could not be hurried in supplying the reason that the sound so distracted me. The circumstances were different enough that I had no reason to make the connection, and yet similar enough that it was impossible to make the connection. Still, eventually a search was carried out, and a match located in the files. The same laugh that I hadn't heard in over a year, now an octave lower. Beyond the end of the bar, at a table near the billiards, a barfly was in the early stages of rising and disentangling herself from the laugher's company. He only raised his cocktail in cheers. I put him at 30 or so, dark hair with a modest curl to it, Latin American to judge from his complexion. Overdressed for the Monaco, with not only slacks and a buttoned shirt even nicer than my own, but with a suit coat with a bright checkered pattern that was intended to make some ill-defined statement even when it was made decades ago, and a wisteria silk bow tie. She hadn't worn one, and a brown felt hat, much battered and aged, of the 1940s style. I don't remember standing, but I remember the crawling gait with which, beer in hand, I walked down the bar and towards that table to examine the man. For the differences in circumstances, preeminent in their number the sex of this cheerful party, that my thoughts were mostly of how unlikely it was that I should witness a coincidence strong enough to remind me of that woman I had once liked and had wished I could forget. The man must have felt my eyes on him, for, his female companion having vacated his presence entirely, he fixed me with an open, disarming gaze that soon spread into a grin. Too late to turn away now without being impolite, I managed to toss out an uncertain hello between my curiosity and my uneasiness. "Well, brother, seems you and I both find ourselves alone and in the market for a solid natter. Sit down, sit down." And I sat, as one might lower oneself, wary, uncertain of what you should do or what mood, when you are brought face to face with a savage beast that merely sits and looks at you. I sat. For I'd heard almost those self-same words once before. Yet how soon can you know what cannot be? So I asked him, "What is your name?" Sure, and then I'll catch yours. You can call me Sammy Boots. Samuel Booton, if you read my license or ask my parents, but I'm just Sammy Boots. Then what's your name?" "Is this your idea of a jest, sir? Did you follow me to this bar, garbed so garishly, and wait to give me this name?" "If you don't care for the name, pal, you're a good 28 years too late to do much about it. Now what's your name? I can't just call you man, so I'm bothering to find out, you see." "David," I returned softly, "as, I must suspect, you well know. Who are you?" "My profession? Life insurance. You can call it a grift if you like, but then I won't sell you one of my premium policies." He laughed once more. It was all a joke to him, this smug fiend, determined to taunt me, except that I could spy no malice in him, any more than I could spot in her. "Not really, not really. Course not tonight. I'm off work, and well do we both need a night off, I should think. What are you drinking?" "All right, Boots," I spat, standing once more. "Have it your way, if you must. You want a natter, do you? I'll give you as much, so long as you give me a few minutes to myself. I have a few calls I must make." "At this hour? Geez, don't you live the life?" "Irrespective of the hour, yes. Don't leave. I don't think you've impressed me enough with your performance, have you?" "Leave? Brother, the glass is half full, and innards not half that. I'll look forward to it." I stepped back into the bar, to where I might have undisturbed use of a telephone, and made such calls as I could to those whom, in the relating of the earlier encounter, I could recall mentioning the given name that to me was given. Their count not so great as one would guess. Of these, not all answered, and not all that did had much grace in the answering. The ones then reachable professed to have told few or none about my story, and in some cases could not even remember the name. Sarah Riley in particular wished to know why I asked, but I apologized that I had no time. No conclusion could be formed to the effect that someone had heard how I'd met one Sammy Boots and elected to play a vile joke on me. The sex of this new individual giving the same name made this explanation seem even less likely. These could not have taken 10 minutes at the outside, in which time I took up a position, moving as needed, to always watch Sammy. He exchanged a word with the barmaid, and was soon in conversation with another patron. After a few minutes, I noticed them gesture in my direction. Sammy took off his hat and waved it, and I heard the words, "piece of trash," evidently directed at me, for Sammy stood and came towards me, looking back at the other man. He moved past me, down the hall to the restrooms, and I had to lean around a wall to keep watch of him. The man he'd been speaking to didn't follow. Just past the toilets, down that straight little hall, the Monaco has a back door that can be unlatched. It's only used for deliveries, but it is solid enough, and their clientele on the whole reliable enough, that they've never bothered to alarm it. This Sammy opened, and I was conscious of the barmaid coming around the bar, ready to protest this exit. But rather than step outside, Sammy threw his hat through the door into the small alleyway and retraced his steps to his seat, ignoring me as he passed, and merrily meeting remonstrations tossed over the bar about the use of the back door, with promises that the offense would not be repeated. His temporary companion moved on in the remaining minute or so that it took me to complete my calls. I took the again vacated seat across from Sammy, who welcomed me back.
"Hope you worked it all out, David. Now what are you drinking? I might have to buy you one, the way you look."
In answer, I held up my can for him to read the label.
"Weak firewater, huh? And I think we know which element it has more of, don't we?"
I said nothing.
"Me, I'm a slow gin spritz man. Always have been. Not to say every bar in this city knows how to mix it up right. This one, it ain't gonna slay me, not unless a Scotsman serves it to me."
Another laugh.
"Me, it'll only slow."
A wink this time. I didn't have patience for much more. "All right, Boots, tell me about yourself."
"That's my line to ask you. You must have lived a more exciting life than a traveling insurance salesman, which is not to say I don't have a tale or two. You tell your story. I'm along for the ride."
The phrase sliced me. She had said that too. I wished then, as I wish now, that my head that night were clearer, for I bit back what I should have liked to say, and instead tried, not to humor, but to entrap. I spoke of myself, swirling in a few glaring falsehoods to any who knew me and watching for a sign of surprise or disbelief. There was none, while trying to get this so-called Sammy to speak of his own life where I could. The details I extracted were pertinent neither to the man in front of me nor to my narrative, and they were limited because Sammy would put forth 4 questions for every one of mine that received either a partial answer or an anecdote. 2 of the latter, indeed, seemed almost the same as the woman Sammy Boots had told me, and I believe now that almost incorrectly applied, owing to time past and state of mind. When Sammy said, in relation to his profession, "We're none of us planning to stick around forever," the repetition and similarity were too great to stand. I am one of those who drink will generally mellow rather than inflame, but my choler would be no more denied. The whole tinge of performance that had in the first encounter endeared, in the second encounter mocked. I reached across the table and grabbed the brightly checkered coat. "You know about Maisie Riley, don't you, Sammy?"
"Maisie? Don't believe I've had the pleasure. girlfriend of yours?" I could swear his tone took on an insolence, though the circumstance may have caused me to read what was not there. I didn't read any recognition. But he was a cunning actor. He had to be. "She's in a hospital. Her mind is gone. She may never recover." "Oh, gee, that's a shame." His concern seemed genuine, and in any other situation, or a quarter hour earlier in this one, it should have placated me. Not then. I shook him. "She told me her name was Sammy Boots, and it wasn't. Why did she say that?" Sammy's eyes opened wide in jovial surprise. "You met another Sammy, did you? Don't that beat everything? Well, I'm your real Sammy. Don't you worry, David." Unconcerned by my grip on his coat, he took a calm sip of his damned slow gin fizz. "As to the why, she said it because that was her name." "It wasn't!" I knew that I was too loud, too agitated, that I was calling attention to us with our altercation, and might be stopped at any time, but I couldn't care. But as I watched him, still so composed, still having such a fine old time, I saw something in his face that made me wonder if I was wrong. I had accepted that he was emulating the woman I had met, was copying everything about her. The motive was only a vague guess. Cruelty, revenge, I didn't know. Maybe it was the calm and cheery openness I saw that seemed too genuine to be part of the role, or some similarity, too tiny to name but too unmistakable to doubt, in his expression or facial movement, that identical, impossibly identical, that was identical, impossibly identical, to the Sammy Boots with whom I was once infatuated. It could also be, it only comes to me as I sit here writing this out, that he then reached to casually scratch at the top of his head and wipe or brush something out of his hair, some faint dark trace that against his dark hair you'd hardly notice. Now that I thought of it, how could he have known how much of what he'd done and said echoed that earlier time, unless Maisie Riley had been in on some joke herself, or someone had watched the two of us very closely in the lock and sham so many months before, neither of which were plausible. If the assumed explanation were not true, then any other explanation seemed hardly natural. I removed my hands from him and lowered them to the table. What's going on? Are you asking what's going on for some adventure? No, with you. Who are you? Who was she? A double question. A sly, very secretive smile. That's all right, then. We can't talk here. Hop on over to my place, and we will. In that moment, I didn't have the courage to. In its clumsy and tillerless hunt for understanding, my mind was abusing the concession that the logical and natural did not hold together, and was throwing up anything unholy and fantastical that could be had. Possession by evil spirit? Demonic interference? Extraterrestrial that took a human form, such as in old films my father would show me. I'll tell you now that I didn't believe any of them, but I did believe that something was wrong here, and that I shouldn't trust this man too far. Besides, if I were alone with him, and he suffered whatever had happened to the first Sammy, my presence at both occurrences would raise questions that I was ill-prepared to answer. No one's listening, I feebly suggested, and in a place that size, with an old jukebox, so soon after I had all but shouted at him, not even a child would have believed it. Not here. Come on, now that we know each other. I shook my head. Hey, I won't let that get up my nose, pal. You just come see me. He withdrew his wallet from his coat pocket and copied down something from it onto a piece of paper. Swing on by when you're in the neighborhood, and boy will we natter and a whole lot more. He handed me the paper, reached up to tip his hat before recalling with a self-deprecating smile that he had no hat, and strode away. Hesitating for a few moments, I followed him as far as the door and, keeping one foot inside, watched him trot down the street, Why Sammy Boots? Why that name? I called after him. He turned to grin at me but didn't stop. Maybe because I'm Sammy and I'll boot you out of my way if I have to. Then he was gone, leaving me to wonder that night and to castigate myself for every night for the rest of my life, because maybe... I don't think it would have ended if I'd followed him, but things might have been better. On the paper he'd scribbled that same name and below it an address, only a couple of miles distant. Crumpling it into my pocket, I carried my drink, in which I no longer had any interest in finishing, back to the bar. "What was that about?" asked the barmaid with curiosity and mild concern. She was a matronly Japanese lady, accent terribly thick, but English impeccable. "He was like someone I once knew. Pretending to be someone I once knew. A madman, perhaps, or a jokester. He hit too close to home, and I think he intended it. Have you seen him before?" "No, I don't remember him." Then he had likely never been to the Monaco before, as the good lady worked there every night they were open, and had for a decade or more, she once told me. And Maisie Riley was not remembered at the Lock and Sham. Less certain, but hinting at a pattern. "Did he chance to introduce himself to you?" I asked as she gave me my check. "Yes, Sammy Boots, and then he said it 13 more times in case any of us missed it. You don't know him?" "I've never seen that man before," I answered truthfully. "That didn't match the name on his credit card, did it?" "He paid in cash," was her brief reply. I couldn't tell whether this were evasion because she probably shouldn't tell me his name any more than Garrett should have, or a simply stated fact. Reaching into my pocket, my fingers touched the address he'd given me. He had looked young enough that a bar should have asked to see his identification, and old enough that many a bartender wouldn't have bothered. "Did you see his ID? He gave me his address, you see, and there's something I might discuss with him. It's about the friend. Something happened to. I shouldn't go, but if I did... I saw it. It was, Jason, I think. If a license is real and the birthday is clear, I don't look closely at the name." I thanked her and left, promising that I'd be careful if I did meet with someone whom I'd just described as a possible madman, and that I'd tell her more of the story some other night. I searched the address I had received the next day. A Jason Granados resided there. He was a grocer, managing one store in a large chain, and his picture, easily found, was a match for the face that had grinned across the table at me in a little gin joint. My mind, true to its habit of picking up and putting down and turning over subjects for thoughtful examination on a veritable mental spit, subjected the question of whether I should call upon Granados to such abuse for a wasted 2 days, and I still would not force it to cease, or would not decide, I must admit. My reader may think the decision unworthy of 1 minute's deliberation, but my fear that I was facing something dangerous and unnatural lightened with the morning's sobriety, yet the shadow would not vanish entirely when the sun struck it. Stronger, or made so by credence forced on it out of convenience, was the fear that some plot I could not fathom had been laid for me, and I'd be playing into the hands of a foe I knew not. I asked Ted for his advice. Near 3 decades my senior, Ted was a friend from the best bar in the city, too long gone, that was my most frequent destination in graduate school, though we would still see each other regularly enough elsewhere. Also, he had been until that year a police sergeant, now enjoying retirement and persisting in his threats to move somewhere nicer. His dependable good sense would guide me, and probably to the decision that I had already reached, with a desire for understanding that could drive out any lingering guilt stronger than fear. I asked him to meet me for coffee and a strange story that afternoon, and told him everything that had happened, as succinctly as I could, and with no omissions, which reduced the succinctness considerably. Ted took it in thoughtfully. And that young woman hasn't improved, he wanted to know. Not significantly, so far as her sister tells me. I hadn't contacted Sarah since that night, and wouldn't until I decided what to do about Granados. Who do you think might be setting you up? And how exactly? I don't know. Mrs. Riley? She blamed me. But what other explanation is there? Other explanation? David, I don't think you've offered a real explanation. How would it look to the police if I were there and he was the same as I found her? From what you've told me, there wasn't a crime before, and that doctor said you couldn't have hurt that young woman. Only thing I can tell you, after 40 years on the force, we have enough crimes we can't solve that we don't have time to look for crimes that aren't crimes and we can't solve. Ted used many words to say what I already knew. I should go talk to this new Sammy. He offered to accompany me the next day. I tried contacting Granados in the meantime. He didn't answer his phone, my message on LinkedIn remained unread, and his business only told me that he was not in. I worried about what we would find when we visited him. I knocked, rang the bell, and even shouted. Granados could simply be out, Ted and I reasoned, and that car in the driveway not his primary means of transportation. I called his store, however, and was more forceful than is my custom, speculating that they were not giving Mr. Granados my messages that I had left with them, and that he would be displeased to hear they had treated an old friend thus. With such tactics I obtained an admission that Mr. Granados had been out for a couple of days, with no prior notice or communication, and the worker I spoke to was plainly concerned. I knew, of course, how we would find him. But I told myself there was hope, as the older lady next door came to ask if Justin was all right, as she shared her worries, as she took the spare key from under the rock by the hedge where he had shown her when he'd been leaving on holiday, as she let herself in, and we heard her trying to talk to him, and the feeble, meaningless sounds of reply, as she described to us how she had found him, and Ted called for an ambulance. I didn't call myself, and I didn't wait to speak to the medical men. What could I tell them that Ted could not? I was sick with myself, sick for not following Granados home that night. Not that there is any chance I would have said anything to help him, or that it would have been better if I'd chanced to, when I wouldn't have what understanding I think I do now, or for going sooner. Or for not going sooner, even if his mind was probably too empty for him to suffer as he lay there, and if I had saved his life by taking action before he died of dehydration. I didn't see him, but I can imagine how he was. Unable to eat or drink, unable to speak, eyes that could make their reports that would never be read, as it dropped off the end of the optic nerve into a mind that was a pitch that could never be filled again. There was one thing I could do to help the man I spoke to but never met. I rang up the hospital and begged my way to Dr. Snyder's personal extension, where I left word that it was of the utmost importance that he call me. He did within the hour. I had hoped not to hear from you again. Her sister hadn't mentioned you in months. You still can't put her out of your mind? I can't. What happened to her, Doctor? I can't really tell you. You damned well better. Once I've told you why, I can't let it lie. It happened again. It took Snyder a few moments to respond. What's happened? A man has been admitted to a hospital. I gave him the name, which Ted had passed on to me. You'll probably want to consult, or have him transferred to your care, or to see him for yourself. The symptoms are the same, though I hadn't the heart to look at him myself. I heard nothing. Then the doctor murmured, "Dear God, why?" I had hoped you or one of your colleagues might know by now, I informed him bitterly. No, please, don't think I blame you, with no other cases like this. There are, however, other cases like this, he ventured. I thought there were none, and that was why it defied understanding. There was another in the past year, and I've spoken repeatedly to that same expert of neurology. He's researched and found disturbing similarities. An older one near here, especially. Then none for a time, and then Maisie, and now another. He sounded defeated, and I thus hoped I might press forward and wring more out of him. Here's how I know it's the same, Dr. Snyder. I met Granados, whom you'll see soon enough, when he could still talk and think, and he was Sammy Boots. The same as she was. The personality, the expressions, the speech, even down to the repetition of identical sentences. So what do you know about this delusion, or whatever it is? He didn't answer. Doctor? At least give me something, some scientific explanation for that. I didn't think it was important, he admitted. When you told me, it had no connection to her life, so I thought it a byproduct of what left her insensible, a temporary side effect, a 1 in 10 million cocktail of neurological misfiring we could never understand or replicate. There are witnesses who heard him use that name. You don't need witnesses. I'll take your word even before I see him, because another one was using the same name, before losing all faculties. They're so rare, and you ran across 2 of them. I felt a jolt of fear, as I couldn't deny that what seemed to be a coincidence was a great enough one to arouse suspicion. I didn't do anything to hurt her or him. Of course not. No ordinary person could have done that to her. Done what to her? I demanded before he'd even finished. Dr. Snyder made a couple of sounds that broke off before they could become words, and though almost saying a word before rejecting it after it had begun, as though almost saying a word before rejecting it after it had begun as laughably unsuitable. Stabbed? He wondered at last. Maisie Riley wasn't stabbed, unless it had been with a hypodermic. I shouldn't have spoken, because he might have said more, so invested was he in selecting words to describe something that he apparently didn't think, for all his medical training, he accurately could. But my statement reminded him of what I did or didn't know, and made him check his speech. No, she wasn't stabbed. Thank you for calling me. I'll ring that hospital, make myself available to them. I'll ask to have a look at Granados after work anyway. I won't bother letting you know about his condition, because you haven't asked me to, and because it would breach the ethics of my profession, and because there won't be anything to let you know. He sounded so horribly certain. Will you at least tell me what it was caused this? Could it help to tell you every particular of my encounter with him in the person of Sammy? No to both, though your offer is appreciated, because, ethics aside, you have nothing to do with it from a medical perspective. It was all over and his fate was sealed, as with her, before you even met him. I set the phone down again, grim and dispirited. I had met another victim of some unquantifiable malady for whom there was little hope, and would get nothing further from the doctor, leaving me in the dark as to what I was up against, and without hope that it would end. I was in the business, even if I hadn't caused it, and, as I now knew, other cases existed that in no way touched me. I committed myself to researching, not neglecting my work or food, but neglecting my friends and my sleep for some days. At first my search extended to medical journals and textbooks, as I tried to find similar cases or a name for this condition, but these are not easily available to the common man, and, when he finds them, are not accessible without turning to the glossary for every third word. And online there is as much useless information on medical matters as there is sound. I centered all my efforts on the name that I had received in 2 separate introductions, because it was the most definite, tangible, and repeated connection between them. I had sought the mention of the name on the internet before, but now I scoured it, searching the name in 100 contexts on every search engine and within individual sites, following up mentions that proved irrelevant, triumphing in the discovery of links that were dead for pages unarchived, so vanished that they might as well never have been. My diligence drove me out into the non-digital world as well. I put up notices, ran ads in newspapers, and sought audience with Granados' friends and relations who might have insight into the days or hours before the night I met him. These last were little forthcoming, and from what I could learn, he'd had an ordinary day, gone shopping once or perhaps twice, and bought clothes, and tried to convince 1 or 2 of those who were responsive to me to accompany him drinking on his final night. Sarah Riley and I spoke again on the telephone, for she wished to know, as may be surmised, why I had called her at unreasonable hours with questions about that awful name, and then pleaded that I had no time to explain. In hopes that she might share more information than I had been unable to get, I related my second night with one adopting the name. It greatly upset her, and she expressed her dismay that these events had now happened twice. More than that, I corrected. Did Snyder not tell you there's been at least one other in the intervening time? No. He did mention that he'd heard of one other case that could shed light on Maisie's. Yes, that was some months ago, around the time he asked me more about the name she'd used, and the day leading up to... She was growing even more agitated. But he said no more about the other case, and I dismissed it as worthless when I asked after it. So I assumed that it had been a false parallel that he'd read into it. He never told me. He may have decided you had suffered enough, and that it was pointless to increase that. And on one of those points we are in full agreement. Yet as to the other, I am not now so sure. Sarah, I must entreat you to tell me more about the day that it happened. There is little enough for me to tell. When I saw her, Maisie was still herself. She never used that name with me. And it was with several girlfriends. Then she went out and bought that stupid suit she wore. She never would have owned anything like that if she'd been herself. The change in her personality had taken place then, that very day, and had driven her to costume herself as the character she would play. Granados, too, was reported to have gone shopping. The pattern held up but led me nowhere. Instead, I reached for the information that Snyder kept so close to his vest. I wish you could tell me what, exactly, happened to cause the effects we've both witnessed. As should I, but the doctors will only say that it defies both chance and logic, and then expound on how much of the brain's operations we have yet to understand. Something happened to her brain, and not that mere bump on the head. Sarah laughed, an explosive sound of scorn and disbelief, but no actual mirth, that ended in the same second that had begun it. A bump on the head? She repeated in similar tones. Yes, she told me she'd gotten it. I had actually forgotten this detail, and my own brain had supplied it in the moment that it was needed. I could hear Sarah breathing deeply over the line, but saying nothing, so I plunged on. Snyder said something was done to her, something no ordinary man could have done. He said stabbed, but then withdrew that as incorrect at once. As soon as she made reply, I knew, in my desperation for understanding, I had pushed too far. Sarah barely held herself in check. She wasn't stabbed. She wasn't injected. What is even the word? Someone tried to kill my sister as one kills an animal, slaughter her like a head of beef. But they didn't, because whatever did it couldn't be like that gun, and couldn't be anything. So it was an accident and a chance, so remote they said it could never be repeated. A few seconds of silence, and then I heard the call disconnect. I couldn't be so cruel as to call her again then, so I sent her a message of apology and the hope that we might talk again once she was ready. It was received without reply. Which left me back with my searches on the internet, when most of what I followed turned out useless or ended in nothingness, which was worse because you never know if that's its actual end at that time, or whether a little more looking will bring you further towards an answer. I did find one passing reference to the Sammy Boots Mania cum Amnesia in a paper on abnormal psychology, published 3 decades or so ago in some eminent journal, but once I bought the article at a cost of over 2 days' wages, academic writing being the industry that it is, I found that this throwaway comparison was its only mention therein, and my endeavors to find and read the report cited from a lecture that the writer had attended in the 1980s came to nothing. Other instances of the name in possible reference to such an event as I had witnessed bore no greater substance. The only real luck I had came on a forum of the occult and the unexplained. I'd written there, asking if any members knew of a spirit or occurrence or anything at all that involved the name of Sammy Boots. An individual, going by the pseudonym of V. Belantis, remembered that there were occasional jokes about that name years ago, in the forum's early years, in context with someone being offended when others did not take the unexplained seriously. Someone had written the legend of Sammy Boots as an entry on a page categorizing creepy fictional monsters and such like, whose origins were in internet tales. A member who took the matter as deadly serious and had researched it was greatly upset and demanded it be taken down. The fictional page had duly been removed and was not to be found in any archive, but from the description that Belantis could supply from memory, I could have no doubt that this so-called legend told of a persona the same as the one I had met. The member who had been so passionate about the Sammy story, he asked me to mention neither his online moniker nor his real name, I was able to contact, inactive on that forum as he had grown, and then to visit. He did not obsess over the story as he long had, but he would still look for it now and again, and indeed his own proprietary blend, refined over many years, of keywords and queries had brought Maisie Riley to his attention. When I explained that I had been with her, it confirmed his belief that this had been another instance, the Christian name Sammy having been somewhere mentioned in connection to it, of the repeated malady that he had studied. He was 1 state away from mine, so using 1 day of vacation, I caught a train to meet with him. The researcher's files on Sammy Boots were as thorough as might exist, but still piecemeal, hanging together around gaping holes where substantial evidence or accounts, never found, should have gone, and with 1 question almost answered for 100 raised. He won't release what he has, having learnt that he shan't be believed, and even now I can't prevail on him to share it. His file suggested more cases than I believe Snyder realized, dating back to the 80s, though not all he could confirm, and they did not all originate in the same area. The last victim, which I think is the descriptor of those whom it befell, was in my city, more than 10 years before that night, when my drunken chattiness caught me up in this horrible affair. Then they had stopped, and in that time he had come to mostly stop his research, taking it up again with nowhere near his once violent zeal when he read of Maisie Riley. The researcher was able to put me onto the track that would lead me to the conclusion of the whole thing. An erroneous term, perhaps, but the only conclusion I've experienced, and feel that I'm likely to. The individuals of both sexes who became Sammy, before losing everything in their minds, each had some unique wounds that could not explain the extent or nature of the cerebral damage. The visible damage, indeed, according to one doctor whose report the researcher had somehow obtained, was strikingly limited and contained. The clothing was the other similarity that so puzzled us both. Miss Riley, Granados, and the others had been wearing clothing neither common to them nor common at all. The pattern and color could offer no discernible correlation, even when I had supplied him with a description of the two that I'd encountered, but every one had been wearing a garish suit coat that could have been from an older time, of color and pattern selected to be as startling and offensive as might conceivably found without employing a tailor. Pardon me for a moment. Open Office has crashed. And how, I remember asking him, did you first come to study this excessively rare affliction? I also remember his grimace as the researcher spoke. A friend of mine became Sammy Boots. He lived 2 doors down and had known our family for years, so in truth you'd call him a friend of the family. But to me he was more like an uncle as well as a pal, just the right number of years my senior to see 'em both in turn. He was eclectic, of a festive and impulsive disposition, always ready with a laugh. So I could tell that he acted differently and dressed differently when he was transformed, but his insistence on a new name and refusal to hear his old notwithstanding, I could still think him the man I knew in a peculiar mood. I was 8, old enough to know something was wrong, too young to go with him. He was going out to drink, they always do, and seeking companions for it. But he said I was too young for that, and maybe we would talk more tomorrow. Talk. He could never talk to me again. The researcher extracted a photograph from a file. I believe this to be the only photo ever captured of someone at that stage. I gasped as I looked it over. The picture showed 2 figures, one a boy in whom I could easily identify the features of the researcher, the other a nondescript man, mid-20s maybe, early more likely. His face wore the same sort of broad, charming grin that I had seen on the face of the attractive young Maisie. I could believe it was the same spirit in a different body as I looked at that. He had on a checkered coat, hideous pink and yellow with sable accents, all striking to see, but nothing enough to earn a gasp. It was the hat. The hat of brown felt perched upon his head, as our grandfathers or their sires would have worn, perched there on his head, not so old and not so battered as when I had seen it, but seen it I had, because this was the same hat that I had twice seen Sammy Boots wear. The hat, I wondered, was that your friend's? No, not that I believe, the researcher mused. I was young, but I cannot recall him wearing it before. I assume he bought it along with that coat to complete a complete costume. Were any of the others who took on this personality found with a hat? Not that has been mentioned. I don't know that he was found with it himself as such, but when you're no longer in control of yourself, a hat might be lost. Do you think the hat important? I did, but my theory had yet to blossom, and I didn't wish to share it, seeing him both eager and yet hoping that he had not missed the key adjoinment for all his scanty evidence for all these years, until I could articulate its entirety. My train was to leave for home soon enough, and on it I tried to telephone Sarah. She wouldn't answer, and so I sent word that I must speak to her very soon, that this was no trivial speculation behind my painful questions. A Sammy might always try to find a similar hat, but something of its fold and shape made me think it was not similar, but the same. And what's more, an old hat of specific color and material is not so commonly found as a coat, and where the coats displayed variation, the hat displayed none. I had only seen Maisie for the space of a number of hours, and that in a state of impairment, but her resemblance to Sarah I found strong enough to cast a queer feeling over our only true meeting in person to date, for its beginning at least, and maybe this was only because my own mind was full of different minds, being in different and maybe this was only because my own mind was full of different minds being in different bodies, or because I was thinking unpleasant thoughts about what could have happened. Sarah regarded me with some annoyance, with some resignation to impending picking of ill-scabbed wounds, and with some measure of pity that I'd noticed in her gaze and voice before. "You can't let it go, can you?" "I can't, but I'm her sister. I have some excuse. More accurately, I can't let go of the whole mess of it beyond your sister. Forgive my persistence, Sarah, but on that day, you said Maisie tried to convince her friends to venture with her to the bars. Do you believe that she thought herself to be Sammy Boots at that time?" "Yes. I spoke to them, and I have no doubt of that." "You said she bought that suit to complete the persona that night. But wait. You said it was after she had contacted her friends. Are you sure of that?" "Yes. Why does it matter?" I blew out my breath. Damnation. I saw the error that shattered my theory. But there was something to the hat. I knew it. I can't say that it doesn't, but I can't say that I know why. I'm so close. I can feel it, I tell you. I found other cases, but the wound on her head... I'm sorry. You said it was like a gun in some fashion. That caused it, didn't it? If I tell you, will you forget every way you know to contact me and stop looking for answers that we'll probably never find?" Under her imploring stare, I debated the possibility. Not for too long. "No," I replied softly. With a bitter smile, Sarah shook her head. "You're honest. I've always thought so. Well then, the stab or injection, neither of which is a fitting word, could be likened to a cattle gun. You know, like the killer Shigur favored." I saw tears forming in her eyes that did not move to comfort her, those instincts subverted by an intuition that I had best let her speak without distraction. "A grossly inapt simile, but something struck Maisie on the top of her head with force comparable to an explosion, driving something incredibly thin but strong through her cranium and into her brain. No shattering of bone, little blood, destruction localized along a small corridor. This was not found in her body when she was examined, but it should have been impossible to extract. Somehow, this imprinted in her the fancy that she was a caricature of a woman called Sammy Boots, and erased all ability of her mind to think, so that then there was nothing. Nobody could have done that to her. Their half-explanation doesn't work at all, and they say that the new identity was a byproduct of the injury, created at random as the brain threw everything it had into coping with the trauma. But it wasn't? I realized then that I had taken her hand. It can't have been. But I cannot explain where the doctors have failed. I had hoped I might, because I was shown a picture of someone else who suffered the same fate, and he was wearing a hat just like your sister's. Oh, that silly hat! Maisie never owned a hat like that in her life, but she had occasion to buy one. It was very unlike her, but even without such injury, we can all sometimes manage to do what's unlike us, can't we? Something about that memory coaxed forth a small but honest smile from her, to my great surprise. I think my mother threw it out. Now the surprise was hers. How did you know about the hat? It was part of her costume. She bought the uniform of Sammy Boots after her injury, didn't she? Yes, the coat. She bought the hat from the New Homes Vintage store the week before. I was with her when she was trying hats on. That was it then. The hat had been worn in the researcher's photo. The hat that was discarded as an old piece of trash in a moment of theatricality and forgotten. The hat purchased at a reputable vintage store whose wares were supplied in large part by estate sales. The hat perched on the beautiful blonde tresses in which I had later found dried blood. The hat that, as an old piece of trash, had been flung out the back door of the Monaco by a man who was purported to have gone shopping twice that evening when its evil work was done. I couldn't explain what was in that hat, be it magic or science, to do what it did, but the hat had to be the originator of the affliction. When I told Sarah my now blooming theory and had pointed out every root of it, she agreed that this was the likeliest explanation we were going to find, fitting in all places, and to clinch it she identified the hat in a copy of the researcher's photograph. Our way was clear now. We had but to find the hat, which is as much to say we had only an unquiet channel of a league or two stretching ahead of us, and a driving necessity to reach the other side, and in the service of this we had a wash tub that might float a weight of 50 pounds across a calm body of water. The hat's journey could be traced only a short ways from where I had last seen it. Taking the night's recycling out through the back door, the friendly Japanese barmaid had found the hat and brought it inside against its owner's return. Having learned from me, when I returned to ask further questions and put up a notice requesting anyone with information contact me, that the hat's owner was in no condition to claim his property and that I did not know him, she put it into a clothing box on the street, where clothes and shoes no longer desired might be placed for the use of the needy. The box's contents had been collected and brought in for sorting and distribution to various shelters and second-hand stores run by charities. I was for making it known that the hat was dangerous and should under no circumstances be worn for any length of time, reminded of the poisoned crystal necklace Miss DeFord tells us of, and the luck that travelled with it on its path towards death, luck that we could not depend on, and that to my thinking had already attended an article so long travelling and so long dormant. Sarah preferred to explain that the hat had such great sentimental value, belonging as it did to a beloved grandfather who had received it under romantic circumstances, that on its safe return the value would be transmuted to the monetary of equal greatness, in the neighborhood of $5,000, and her preference prevailed. The coalition of charities overseeing the vestment dispersal operation was both sympathetic and tantalized by thoughts of the good that could be done with this reward. The hat was not to be found in their warehouses, and if it was not in possession of some needy man, we did not like to think that this could be the case, then it was on a truck bound for one of many second-hand stores. Miss Riley and I would not let the enormity dispirit us. Every second-hand store in that city and the surrounding was contacted with the same story, and with the picture of the hat being worn, cut from a copy of the researcher's photograph at his request. Staff as well as management listened to the hat's fabricated history. Ads were run, and postings were placed in every virtual venue that we considered remotely worthwhile. We even made efforts to speak to the needy who might have received it, though brown felt hats are uncommon enough these days that a shop seemed a more likely destination. To speak the truth, I think we both feared that the hat might be lost until it claimed a new victim. But we did not admit the possibility to each other, and in this way we kept the admissions from ourselves, though I only say this with certainty for myself. For long, far too long, every report we received was of a different hat, some not even all that much like the description and picture we'd circulated. Then a new report came in, and because it did, that hat will bring no harm to anyone else. That's not enough for me. Not with the way it ended that night. The night that we hoped to kill Sammy Boots forever. The message came to our office, but with some needlessly frantic burst of business occupying our every thought, I didn't receive it for several hours. An assistant manager we'd spoken to at one thrift shop, affiliated with a children's hospital, thought he had the hat in question. Neither he nor whomever had placed it there had thought so at first, but looking closer at it, and accounting for the wear afforded by years and usage, he considered it a good chance of this being the hat that my lady friend and I held so dear, and would it please me to come to the store, where he had placed it in safekeeping behind the counter, to examine his find and bring my checkbook with me. I called Sarah, but it was absolutely impossible for her to leave work for several hours. Not willing to leave anything to chance, I faked a bout of food poisoning, was given leave to spend the rest of the day on bed rest, and made it to that thrift store as quickly as I could. The assistant manager met me at the door, wringing his hands with excitement. "So happy you were able to make it today. I believe, I really do, that this is the hat you're looking for. You brought your checkbook?" I waved it, waiting until I had seen the merchandise before I should open discussion of whether the entire sum should go to him or his establishment was owed a portion. "Excellent. That money will be put to very good use, indeed. It's just here I had it saved behind the counter." His complexion turned an unsightly color as he saw that there was no hat in the place indicated. "Ash!" he barked. "Where is that hat?" "The one that was here?" the young man behind the counter asked. "The one that was there, in the section of items not to be sold. Where?" "I've just sold it to a girl, sir. There was no note on it to say that it was being held." I felt worse than the assistant manager looked. How fickle luck was. With us in the morning and against us in the afternoon. I sliced through the beginning of what promised to be a long diatribe of recriminations and protests. "When did you sell it? Who was she?" "Only a minute ago. She paid with cash and gave no name. We saw it. When she saw it, she said—" "I don't care," the apoplectic assistant manager rumbled. "And I don't give a damn either way. I must have that hat," I shouted. "What did she look like? Where did she go? I must catch her." "A dark girl. Curly hair, quite short. Turned left out the door, I think, and I haven't seen a car leave yet." There might be time then. I ran, heedless of the assistant manager's strident insistence that he was still due some fee, once the hat was in hand, and the counterman's bewildered apologies. Out the door I went, as a white Hyundai, an unremarkable car no different from 50,000 on the road today, rolled past me, its driver a female that might match his description. The flash of bags with the name of the store in her back seat, and a rim of brown visible within it. Like a wild fiend I chased after her car, catching up as she paused to turn out of the parking lot. She got a fright when I rapped on her passenger side window, waving at her. I saw her reach for the stick, thinking that I was a robber or mad. "Wait!" I jumped around the hood, in front of the car, my hands held up. "Please, listen. I won't hurt you. I only want to buy your hat." "A hat? What is wrong with you? Get out of my way." She had a Midwestern accent, from which state I couldn't tell. "You just bought a hat, but it was sold in error. That's very valuable, in sentimental terms, to my family, and we've been searching for it so long. Please." The young lady had not gotten over the shock I had caused her. I judged her to come from a small town, and while fright remained, indignation had replaced it in part. They were right about the crazy people out here. I'm not crazy. That hat belonged to my grandfather. I'll pay you a large reward for it. I kept my hands up, striving to appear harmless, as she continued to stare at me. She turned to look behind her, where the view of the hat must not have inspired belief that it was worth any large reward. I could tell from her expression. I'm not interested in this, whatever it is. Let me past. I didn't think she would run me over, but she could have tried to drive around me, and I felt I was losing ground. All right, I placated. I will. But please, I gave her my name. I say, in complete seriousness, that I am prepared to pay $5,000 for that hat. You can search my name online and see my picture. You'll find I'm who I say I am, and I am respectable. I like to think I do not have a threatening presence, and the young woman seemed to judge me no immediate danger, but she still wasn't going to trust me. I'm going to be late. Of course, you need time. Let me give you my email and phone number. I scribbled them with unaccustomed speed on a slip of paper. I was panicking by now, please understand, because I couldn't lose her. I beg of you, think it over, verify who I am, and contact me so I can explain everything. Her driver's side window was open, but a crack so we could speak. Not bothering to answer, she rolled down her passenger window a couple of inches and motioned me towards it. Struggling to effect a calmness and ease while my nerves jittered, I moved out of the car's intended path and towards her window, praying she wouldn't speed away as soon as I was clear. The sum of $5,000 must have hooked her at least enough to stay her 5 seconds more. Here, I dropped the paper through the window. Please contact me. Please don't wear the hat. We don't want it any more worn than it is. She might not have received the end of my feebly justified request, as her car was already accelerating past me. I barely had time to read her license plate as she shot down the street at something more than the speed limit. The afternoon's events, when I related them, were infinitely less than Sarah Riley would have hoped for, but she conceded that I probably could have fared no better than I did in those circumstances, and agreed that at least all was not lost. We waited for a call or an email that might not come, but 2 days later it did. The girl still would not give her name, but she wanted to hear more. Now I was faced with a new dilemma. Tell her the story that Sarah and I had agreed upon, or tell her the truth. Deciding wrong could be disastrous. I took the route that I thought safer and relayed the story of the grandfather's hat in detail, with pleas of sentimentality that I barely turned away from the ridiculous. It seemed I had decided rightly. The young woman would meet the two of us that night. 3 hours later, tomorrow night was the latest she could ever meet us, she said, at an outdoor setting sufficiently public that she would not feel herself in any danger. A public library with sufficiently spacious grounds was selected, and the funds had to be in cash. No, she really didn't trust us, and maybe there was she really didn't trust us, and maybe there was a stubbornness in her nature. I remember her final words to me, which came as I ended our plan-making with another plea not to wear the hat. It's really a pretty nice hat. I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't. I went to my bank and withdrew enough to cover most of the reward, and Sarah did likewise to provide the remainder. We drove in her car to the appointed place a half-hour before the appointed time. At last, it seemed, we would ensure that nobody would ever meet Sammy Boots again, and we would be on the path to finding answers. There was a certain table outside the library, but in full view of its windows, such as would be deserted after dark, affording us privacy, but public enough that the girl wouldn't feel threatened. She had not yet arrived, so we seated ourselves, the well-stuffed bank envelope prominently visible on the table between us, and waited in what we prayed was a reassuring and welcoming little tableau. the darkness beyond the nearest lamp-post and the line of trees that muffled the sounds of the city doing little for our nerves. Then the short, dark girl spoke, in the voice I recognized. "Well, folks, seems yous and I both find ourselves alone and in the market for a solid natter. Mind if I sit down?" She had the same pleasant grin, the same frank manner, the same easy walk, no different than the first night. The same speech, only modified by the make of the girl's larynx. No suit coat, only a light jacket that she must have had with her, even though she pulled at the sides like a man adjusting his fine suit. The hat on her head, of course. The same hat. "Is that her?" Sarah whispered, and I don't think she wished to confirm that this was the girl we awaited. I stood, gripped by helplessness, as the diminutive figure sauntered towards us. I didn't know her at all, but I was looking at a girl whose mind was as good as dead, and simultaneously had the same personality I had once found charming and now found detestable. "You put on the hat," was all I could find for a start. "Sure I did. Still gotta get dressed up swell, though, if we're going for a night on the town. Dig up a nice little watering hole or two. You know me, right?" When neither of us responded, she seemed to make up her mind. "I was going to call up a few friends to come out. What's your name?" She stuck out her hand to Sarah first. Sarah took it out of habit, but barely held it at all, as Sammy gave her a hearty shake. "Is this what she was like?" she asked me, looking down at the girl's persistent smile. I nodded and murmured that it was. I would have taken her for real. The repulsion in Sarah's voice could not be overlooked, but the young woman, Sammy, I may as well say, affected a jovial mock offense in her response. "Take me as you find me, lady, 'cause I'm as real as any of you, or old Mrs. Booton has been leading me down a path all right. Didn't catch your name." Sarah, having withdrawn her hand, was holding it as though a slug had crawled across her palm, and I made no offer to extend my own as Sammy turned to me. "Or yours neither. I can't call you Sourpuss Dick any more than I can call her Fetching Biddy, or folks might think I was talking about myself." "Why couldn't you leave her be?" I managed. "What's pinching you?" She seemed bewildered at how I addressed her. In that moment, I thought that this person had no idea of who she was or how she had come into being, and at what cost. Rather, in her own understanding, she was a person like any of us, and though I know Sammy has some understanding of how she came to be, her words or actions at times directed by guidelines that the process imprints along with the personality, she still believes herself as much a person as the one that develops in a brain naturally from birth. "We can all be great friends, you know, buddy. You can call me Sammy Boots. Not my birth name or my license name, any more than Buddy is yours, but sure, I'm Sammy Boots." "You aren't, so stop saying that name," demanded Sarah, experiencing pain from the repetition, I think, while it brought more anger than pain to me. Unperturbed, the girl made a song of it. "Sammy, Sammy, Boots, 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 the first one saying, 'What's Sammy Boots?'" She laughed, then stepped up to Sarah and grabbed her arm in a monstrously chummy fashion. "It's as good a name as any, Biddy, and it happens to be mine." Why, though? I wondered of her. How to help the actual young woman was more than I could sensibly work out with that person before us. I might have pulled the hat from her head, but the damage had been wreaked, and for all I knew the hat was still reaching her brain, and forcible removal could cause even worse and more violent damage. So instead, not believing she might be saved, but never knowing, my own mind fell into its old habits, as I instead sought out understanding. Why the name Sammy Boots? My parents might have had some say. leave off that tale about your parents. Why are you called Sammy Boots? Because I'm Sammy, and Sammy boots anyone out of the way when she has to. That statement echoed one the second incarnation that I met had made to me, I now remembered. Out of the way, and out of their own minds? I have to go somewhere, don't I? Your name is some despicable joke, and therefore... Boots? Your name is some despicable joke, and therefore Boots? Sarah demanded. And that's what you believe you're doing? I appended. For the first time, true exasperation passed across Sammy's face. That's what you called it when I got my hat, you know. They wrote their gazookases using your language, and if you people are still going to be such little shilly-shallies with your techno terms, that's hardly their fault, is it? Aw, jeez. Her grin unfurled once more, but in it there was a faint insolence and calculation that had not before weighed upon it. Each Sammy I had hitherto spoken to, however evil its means of creation, was an affable creature that did not exhibit any menace. But now I thought her to stand on her guard. As I replayed her words, looking for their sense, which was not at once apparent, Sammy relaxed a touch and tried out her old easygoing approach, without complete success to my ear. A game's more fun when you play the game. You can see that, can't you, Biddy? This to Sarah. What's your line of work, anyhows? Sarah backed up and sat once more at the table, thinking, I suppose, to calm and anchor herself as much as to make Sammy follow. It's no game for me. But why don't you explain yourself? Sammy sauntered up and hopped on to the top of the table, seating herself with raffish disregard. I think I enjoy fun a bit more than you, and you're making me think I should find a new friend for a few drinks tonight. No name, no work, no story in you. You're the type to leave me, discarded as this old piece of trash. So saying, she removed her hat and, after lazily spinning it around on one finger, flicked it off, landing it a few feet from my position. The trace of blood in her hair was not even fully dried. I was more aware of Sarah's urgent stare than of Sammy's laughing banter as I picked up the hat and examined it. It could easily be thought to be an ordinary hat, save that it was heavy. Not so much that you would think it wasn't a hat if you had little experience with felt hats of bygone days, but enough so that, if you were looking for something odd as I was, you would know that it had more to it than felt. Turning it this way and that, never bringing it too near my face, I could tell that the crown was higher than the inside by an inch at least. Battered as it was, it held its shape so well. I did not reach inside, thinking it might stab or inject my hand with results that could not even be guessed at, but I gingerly felt the top of it. There were pieces of metal sewn into it, invisible to the eye, but felt distinctly when one pressed down. No, it was not an ordinary hat, and there was something inside it that, with its meticulous strike of destruction, could create unthinkable woe for the soon unthinking wearer. You'll like it, it's yours, but you can find a better hat, buddy, trust me, Sammy offered. Sarah, whom I had not noticed coming to stand at my side, took the hat from my hand. This is it, what took my sister away, she said simply. It has to be, I agreed. You met another Sammy, did you? Don't that beat everything? Sammy was chortling much harder than was warranted, a merriment in which Sarah perceived an insult. She doesn't understand. We'll have it studied, safely, and maybe, if we put it back on Maisie, it will cure her. How so? I inquired dubiously. I don't know. It made no logical sense to me, but in Sarah's desperate, fevered hope, it was a possibility unconsidered, and this was sense enough. It could stab or attack her again, the same way, and reverse its effect, because there must be a way to. What if the people who made it wore it by accident? They'd have to have a safety measure in place. There wasn't enough physical damage that they could understand it. If it could undo what it had done. With the presence of Sammy, so long departed from Maisie by all appearances, I couldn't see what it might do, but the notion of a safety measure did cause me to wonder. I turned to look at Sammy and found, with some alarm, that she now stood right next to myself and Sarah, her movement unnoticed. "You can't do that." The quiet certainty of her voice made her smile seem that much more dangerous. I met Sarah's eyes over the shorter Sammy's head, and she looked at the girl and nodded. "We might save Maisie, but now we must try to save this nameless victim." She continued to speak as I turned to her, holding up the hat. "You better not make anyone wear that hat twice. We're talking worse than memory issues and machine damage. A whole hell of a lot worse." She held out her hand. "I'll take care of that for you, if you don't mind." Sarah reached out for her, I think to hold the young woman still so I might hold the hat on her. But Sammy dropped, and with a spring and roll that I doubt even a professional tumbler could have managed, used her body to knock Sarah's legs out from under her. She was back on her feet in a mere second. I ran at her, hoping I might jam the hat onto her head, and that would be enough. Sammy's stature gave her the advantage, and with a duck and a twist akin to judo, she threw me over in the grass, plucking the hat from my fingers as she did. I lay there stunned for likely not much more than half a minute, when I took notice of what sounded like Sarah's moaning, and a ripping and snapping sound. Snapping and then feeding. The hat sat by Sammy, torn up. The noise of swallowing. Sarah didn't get a clear look at it as Sammy tore it out. She can only say that it was finely crafted and metallic, curiously shiny, whatever was inside that hat. I saw Sammy deal with the last of it, snapping the piece of metal in half with her bare hands, the force required making it cut into her and draw blood. She put 2 pieces of metal in her mouth and gulped them down. Seizing up the hat once more, she tore a strip of felt with her teeth and chewed it up. Sarah and I were shocked enough by this unnatural but effective disposal that we only watched until she finished her meal, the contents of which by then could have told us nothing of use anyway, I think. Sammy rose and coyly shook her head at us. "Don't think I'll have to worry about that. You don't really want to talk to me, do you? Not to sweat. I'll find someone else. The night is young and full, unless I'm gonna be real disappointed, of slow gin fizzes, and I will be too." Chuckling, she began to walk away until I called for her to wait. We might never understand Sammy Boots, and with the hat's destruction there might never be another instance of her. But I hated so that this young woman could not be saved, that I resolved to try a desperate emotional appeal directly to her. In taking this course, I did both the most harm and the most good for Sammy's victim, and for the rest of us, I can't begin to guess. "Please, listen to me." I drew up to her cautiously, not wishing to be thrown on my back again. "Let go of this woman's mind." She didn't seem to understand at all. "Or, if your mind is still in there, know that you're not Sammy." "Of course I am. Or who else would I be?" She was confused, yes, but also curious. I thought perhaps here was an opening. "I don't know, but you are not this. You have your own mind." I was gripping her by her shoulders now, not in threat but in urgency. "It's my own brain. What more do you want?" The affected speech seemed to falter, but then she laughed again. It outraged me. I couldn't tell if it was only Sammy or if it was Sammy and the other. "I'm trying to save you," I shouted. Her expression turned at once to one of sober inquiry. "Do you want to save me?" "Yes," I erupted. Sammy's body relaxed, and her face bore witness to incredible concentration. Then she smiled, and in that smile was all the confidence and charisma that left no doubt of whom I addressed. Sammy's saved, brother, and thanks. I didn't know what I had done, but that something had happened could not be denied, and I was terrified that I had furthered the conquest of her mind and made it permanent. Not Sammy. I'm trying to save you. Yourself. Who you've always been. Fight it. Do you want to save her? Yes. One moment. Poking up a fence. Sammy again relaxed and exhibited great force of thinking. Her brow wrinkled, her eyes squeezing shut. Her whole body began to quiver, a fit generated by the intense work of her mind. Sarah and I both grabbed her, certain she would fall. She did not, however. She opened her eyes, regained control of her body, and looked at us in consternation. Let go of me! Her voice had lost that dated precision that characterized Sammy's speech. By miraculous chance, we had done it. No longer did we speak to this interloper forced into minds, but to the short, dark girl who had, in her fancy, bought an unusual hat. Sarah and I let go of her, laughing with relief. The girl looked between the two of us, in doubt as to our sanity and how she had found herself there. We're so sorry, Sarah exclaimed. Of course we didn't mean to startle you. We're just so glad that you came to sell us the hat, I mean. The young woman nodded cheerfully. Thank you. Her Midwestern accent had vanished. Saved. And as a reminder, it's encouraged, Biddy, as you can get a nasty memory leak if you don't write it into your matrix. The speech was unmistakable. Sammy? Sarah asked in horror. At your service, but like I said, you two don't have much of a story, do you? The two of us can find better friends than you. There's plenty to be done, and since we're none of us planning to stick around forever, I think we'll meet a gang and start with a drink. The girl spoke as herself, rather than Sammy, once more. How did you get me here? Her hands flew to her head and found it bare, then down to her pocket and found it empty. Did you take it? Sammy again. Maybe just 2 tonight, since she's got a town to skip. Maybe we can help you, if you listen to us, I began, my hands again raised. We each took one step closer, and I swear to you, Sammy was smiling at me, so deliberate, when she intentionally switched control of her faculties back to the girl. What are you doing? Get away! She cried, and she bolted from us, speeding towards the library. Her flight took us by surprise, and she had made it inside but moments after we gave chase. I burst through the door, Sarah behind me, and paid no heed to the surprised and reproachful looks of the few patrons and employees. Sammy could have turned behind any shelf, down any aisle, around one of 2 corners. The sound of rapid footfalls muffled by carpet. I started forward, but which aisle was it? Which way would she emerge? There she was, flashing into view as she threw open the door. She threw open the door, and with a laugh showed a. Threw open the other door, and with a laugh that showed us who was in control at that moment, fled into the night. We followed, of course, as we might have no other chance to save her, to stop her, to find out what Sammy was and how victims of the hat might be helped. Then, outside, we stopped. And for as much as we denied it to ourselves, I am sure, I knew, at least, that we would never see her again, as that white Hyundai sped from the lot and into the busy street, a terrified girl looking once over her shoulder as she drove it, wondering why a man and woman she had never met had lured her there and were trying to capture her. My readers can imagine the steps taken to find her, as well as they can imagine the results these brought us, as she was long gone by the time we could pursue by Sarah's car, and we had nothing that could induce law enforcement to search for her, save outright lies which would likely as not land us in cells, and a truth that would add little more outside of duration of stay and padding of walls. The plate, once I prevailed on Ted to have an acquaintance trace it, directed us to the company that rented cars to travelers, and they could not be induced by anything short of a court order to divulge the names of any of their clients. I have made efforts to find that girl who now is and is not Sammy. With no further intelligence about her than the pittance I have, I don't anticipate finding her unless she contacts me, knowing my name, and I don't wait for her to do so. Miss Boots wouldn't allow it. It may surprise you to learn that I am still friends with Sarah, and as painful as the whole experience has been, I think she appreciates what I tried to do, and she will argue, in my presence at any rate, that I made things turn out better than they would have. In her sister, there has been little change. Dr. Snyder grasped at an optimism I didn't feel when we told him the full account of that hat, and the man had either the practicality or the audacity to venture that there might be another such hat awaiting discovery, and its study could not only help the victims, I think that impossible, but also further our understanding of the mind's workings, of less interest to me. He'll begrudgingly take the odd call from me, so I now make them rarely, unless I have something to report. I don't. I can commiserate now with the researcher's long ago dismay and ire, as the name and personage that left its mark on his life was fictionalized and bandied around the internet with fabrications and speculations offensive in their deviation from the truth, affronting the eyes of any with some inkling of the truth. My inquiries and searches, combined with the hushed account by others who met an individual bearing that name, has ignited discussion of what most take to be a modern legend, and in it my name has not spared mention. The chief debate is whether Sammy Boots exists. She lived in fleeting and devastating instances before, but now she exists, somewhere, perfectly hidden in another. That's my doing. Her reason for being may or may not have changed in this more stable incarnation, since we never knew it in the first place, but she has a reason and a goal, and now, as substantive information about her is so awfully sparing, I can't help but think that she's brushing her tracks away herself, unless someone with greater knowledge of her does so. So while her existence I know, I don't know what makes a man himself, only that its mechanism is exponentially more complicated than the scientists dream of, and that what it is can be lost. I know that a process occurred to create Sammy, but not how it was effected beyond the crudest, most bumbling description, and still less of how it worked. I know that, in the turns into the unmapped fog that I took, beyond what most of us will, I glimpsed a passage and have been informed ever since of wall and pit. I do not know, but at the last I do not know, but at the last Sammy made me suspect that infernal hatters did not make only one, and where this one seemed deficient, others may be of sound make. I will close with one spot of trivia brought to my attention as I pored with minute fixation over every word of Sammy Boots's discourse that I could record, including her very name. Before my time, in the infancy of the computer as we know it, when programs were distributed chiefly on large and floppy diskettes, the difficulties posed by unstandardized manufacture of the machines and the competing operating systems induced some companies to release their software with not only a program, but an entire operating system on the disk that would create the framework needed to instruct the program in its behavior. The players of 1980s computer games could insert such a disk into a computer with no operating system or drive of any kind, and the game would still run. Once the disk was removed and the program ceased to run, the computer would be as empty as before, a shell that might power on, but could recognize no other program save from another such disk, unless an operating system were installed. These disks were called booters, but the term, like the technology, is long obsolete. The end. Wow. That was a very long story. We can't switch back to normal and see who's here. Oh yeah, Yak. Yes, it was a story that I wrote. Took a while to get scary, I imagine. Hey, Dragon of the West. Yeah, I'll put the mask back on in a little bit if you're still here. Anything but the hat. And hey, Niftiness, welcome in. Oh, Captain Thacko headed to bed. Thank you, Yak Man. I appreciate it. I don't know if I'll publish at Backlog Cabin. I don't know what to do with these stories. I haven't looked into publishing short stories in a long time, but maybe I should. I feel like this one didn't turn out as well as my other Halloween ones, but I've got a nice little pile of short horror stories now from years before as well. And then I became more focused on first playwriting and radio playwriting, and then went to school for film and TV. No, you're right, backlog, because I've printed copies of some, or they're scattered on different hard drives. I need to compile all my writing from all the years and put it on a couple of nice big spare hard drives, or get myself a online backup or something. You put it into a Google Drive. But it's one of those things I should do and get my life in order and move forward, but oh, buy something like Dropbox. Yeah, it's another one of those things that I keep needing to spend time on. I know I got so much on old computers. Oh, let me give Niftiness a shout out. I can't remember if I gave Dragon. I'm trying to remember whom I gave shout outs to. Yeah. Oh, it's the House of the Dead spin-off in the, what's it called, Die Hard arcade engine. And thank you, I appreciate that. Glad I can at least, yeah. That really needed to be proofread. Like, that was a rough draft that needs to be polished. But, yeah, I'll try to rewrite that story, see if I can shorten it some. It was pretty long, and fix it up a bit. Yeah, I just finally finished it tonight and did light rewrites trying to fix it up. Yes, yeah, I always know I should. Oh, thanks. I mean, I always edit a little as I go, but
It's one of those things. I know I can do better. I'm also one of those writers who prefers to plan out more and try to get it right on the first draft. But I've noticed with short stories, sometimes I'll find a few more twists and turns. Usually small ones as I'm in the writing process. Because I plan them out less meticulously than I try to for longer things. I don't know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you get it, yeah. It's never completely finished. There's always more tweaking to be done. And now... Yes, I know this will be a shorter Halloween stream than most, but... we'll play one more game, and then we'll call it a night. And it's good that this is quite a short game. Oops. Here it was. Thank you. I appreciate it and hope you have a good night. So, this is one of the more obscure. I know this was 2 years ago I played the Mind Dark Productions Halloween fan games. And there were a bunch of, number of fan games by different little studios based on old horror movies and made with click and play and such programs. Other ones too. But this is one of the more obscure ones. It's the Halloween fan game by Blort. What a name. And I played it years ago, and I think I still have it on an old computer or an old CDRW somewhere. Then for a good while it wasn't available online. Yeah, their website's been down for, I don't know, 15 years. And then a couple of years ago, the same person who put the Mind Dark Halloween fan games up online also put this and a bunch more up online. Now we can play it again. And it runs in Windows through ODVDM. Am I the first person to stream it on Twitch? I could say yes, and I could say no, but the truth is, I'm uncertain. Matthias Sachal. My resolution is fine, thank you. It's going to be difficult to play exactly, but... Oh, you beat Brutal, checks Quest. Congrats, Yak. On a black and unholy Halloween night years ago, little Michael Meyers brutally slaughtered his sister in cold blood. For 15 years, town residents have rested easy, knowing that he was safely locked away in a mental hospital. Until tonight. I'm Dr. Sam Loomis. I'm sure Michael walks around in Haddonfield. I'm going to have to search the old Myers house for any signs of him.
I'm not hungry.
Judith's room. Oh, Sam Loomis was a strange name. Uh-oh. There he is. Are you saying they called him Michael Meyers the Shape in the screenplay? Oh. He's called the Shape in the credits, got it.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left.
Oh, there he
No
goes.
reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
It's your game now, Michael. Kill Laurie and anyone who gets in your way. Password? Shatner. It's funny because he has the face of Shatner. He's got to be down here somewhere. I've seen higher jumps in a cinematic platformer. Significantly higher. Well, I guess this was released in 03. Yeah, I guess that is about right now that I think about it. I was thinking it was slightly later, but thinking about which computer I think it was on. Oh, good thing we have a password. Oh, wait. Shit. I need to trigger the menu in a KNP game again. God, it's one of the function keys, but I don't want to press the wrong one. Done. Game started up again. F8, you can access the options menu. Purblind Gamer LLC does not condone the use of knives to stab the police force to death. Just saying. Also, this game is not for children. And if you're less than 18, then I hope you have your parents' written permission to watch this stream. Freeze! No.
By freeze, you mean stab? Stabby, stabby, murder, murder. Throwing knives. That's what the special is for. Just like in the movie, he's terribly slow. Don't remember him throwing knives, though. His middle name is Audrey. I didn't remember that. I knew an Audrey in college. We were really good friends. I also knew a giant plant named Audrey. And it wasn't so much that I knew it, I read about it in a comic book. And then saw it in a musical. Oh, that was in his grade, so Michael Audrey Meyers. Oh, I got him. Maybe I need to go faster. Maybe those policemen were standard can-piece sprites. Seems like they might have been. What? Hey, there I am. God. What's that? There's some trick. Seems like there is some trick to this. Did I play this? Was it high school? God, maybe. At least my health will replenish. Oh, you freeze. I mean, he's not moving now. Hey, there I am. Oh, can't stab. Interesting. Oops. Well, you can throw the knives down. We cool? We're not cool. Okay, so they'll stop shooting. The Myers twins at it again. Hey, why are they after me? I haven't committed any crimes yet. Or maybe I already killed her friends and ate that dog. Yeah. Twice the Michael, twice the fun. Ooh. I didn't know there was a brutal Wolfenstein too. Is that really difficult, Yak? I was never sure how much Brutal Doom made it more difficult and how much it was just made it bloody. Hello, can I introduce you to Death? Laurie is dead. Now Michael is going after Jamie. HMH. Run, Jamie, the boogeyman is coming. Wait. Is he in Halloween 2? Oh dear, I'm playing as the kid now. Wow. Oh, in Brutal Checks Quest, the Flammers were doing 50 a hit. What did they? Oh, like 50%, damn. At least in Check's Quest, they have short range only. Right. But yeah, we just saw a little child get her head cut off. I probably should watch Halloween 2 again. I don't know if I'll head on to the rest of the series. The boogeyman is coming. If I go upstairs. Oh, well, this kid can jump more than Michael. Oops. Michael doesn't do ladders. Woo! Haddonfield Mental Hospital. Come on, Jamie. We'll take you away from here. Michael's like, oh, really? Thanks. Password Sam Hain. What do you mean, Samhain? Yeah, Samhain, the seeds of discontent. Jamie and the cops fled into a warehouse. You are Dr. Loomis now. You have to shoot Michael, but you also have to protect Jamie from Michael's throwing knives by shooting them. Your bullets are limited. Use them wisely. Use the mouse to aim and control to shoot. Boy, confusing controls they would have in K&P. This is going to be tough. Got him. Remember, this is being tough, but I know I beat it before. that one well. Shit. Cursor went off screen. I only have to stop a couple. You use the arrow keys to move, the mouse to aim, control to shoot. Can you guys think of any issues with this setup? It's like if I go off screen, or off the edge of what the game thinks is the screen, it won't let me shoot after that. No, seriously. Something up. Is that if I click with the mouse, it won't let me fire after that, because reasons. It's not that simple. And you know, I don't know if the game is glitchy or it's that it's meant to run on Windows 3.1. Airplane? Welcome in. Oh, that's great. You were at the Fallout fan event. And that you made it back safe. Did you have a good time there? Yes. This game has not heard of hit points, but as with the infinite continues, how much can I complain? Cosplayers explore the town, and you said you got to eat quail? I'm trying to think if I've ever actually had quail. And I know that's neat getting to talk to other fans of the series about it. Like, we all enjoy it so much. Oh, okay. You got to see the quail. I agree. Quail are very cute. Hey, dragon. It's going all right so far. Hard though. Hard. Controls are not your friends unless you have 3 hands. Is one of the cops shooting still? Run away now, Jamie. It's going to blow. Congratulations, you defeated Michael Meyers. So that was the end. Fun little game. Enough to... not super long, but enough for a little challenge. He'll be back every year for another terrible movie. He made arranged the MIDI of the Halloween theme himself. No, they are the ones out there, because Army of Darkness used one for their title screen. Password to bonus level. FVSJ. Furious Vixens singing jazz? Yeah, agreed. We like Halloween 3 around here. Evil Irish Magic. Dan O'Hurley. Freddy versus Jason? It would appear so, chat. How is this gonna go down? Oh, we're Freddy. Oh, it's a two-player game. Ooh, chainsaw? The default K&P movement engine. Hey, is that Mr. Sandman? We've played songs about or games about Sandman. Oh, oops. But it is a well-known fact that fighting games in the K&P engine are not good. I'm just wondering. Hey, I don't suppose we can have network play on this. When's Michael gonna show up? Remember what his other keys were. I thought it said there was another code. Oh no. Oh no, that's it. That's the only bonus. Hey, at least they had a bonus. Alright, speaking of the Sandman, it's about time I wrapped up our annual Halloween stream and headed to bed. Why is it still there? That's weird. Oh. Well, I just... program is being glitchy. I don't know. There's something else capturing it using... I don't know, maybe using a different capture method, and then it's frozen. No matter. Let's blame old Windows. Usually I end the Halloween stream with a song, but I didn't prepare one this year, and it's late. So instead, I'll just recite a horror poem that I was quite fond of as a child. This probably says a lot about how I turned out. I gotta look up the person's name to make sure I have it right. I love this costume. Don't want to embarrass myself by saying the name wrong. It's interesting that I was thinking it's uncommon that you can play as both the victim and the killer in one of these games. Like, we got to play as Michael Meyers and Dr. Loomis and Jamie. But I was wondering if how many other games did it, but I thought of the... God, was it called? The Visitor or the Invader? There was some old Flash game where you play as this, tiny alien worm that keeps taking over and killing bigger and bigger creatures. And then in the final scene, you play a human victim trying to kill the alien monster. I gotta find that. They had a couple sequels to it. Ah, yes, Ian Serralier. Yes, dragon, just for the end. This is The Visitor by Ian Serralier. A crumbling churchyard, the sea and the moon. The waves had gouged out grave and bone. A man was walking, late and alone. He found a skeleton laid on the ground. A ring on a bony finger he found. He ran home to his wife, and he gave her the ring. "Oh, where did you get it?" He said not a thing. "It's the loveliest ring in the world," she said, as it glowed on her finger. They slipped off to bed. At midnight they woke, in the dark outside. "Give me the ring," a chill voice cried. "What was that, William? What did it say?" "Don't worry, my dear, it will soon go away." "I'm coming," a skeleton opened the door. "Give me my ring," it was crossing the floor. "What was that, William? What did it say?" "Don't worry, my dear, it will soon go away." "I'm in the room now. I'm here by your bed." The wife pulled the sheet right over her head. It was torn from her grasp and tossed in the air. "I'll drag you out of bed by the hair." "What was that, William? What did it say?" "Throw the ring out the window. Throw it away." She threw it. The skeleton leapt from the sill, scooped up the ring, and clattered downhill. Fainter and fainter. And then all was still. I always liked that poem. Wish they'd done that. The chair had done something of that for the haunted library back in school. I think I suggested it to him. And on that note, yes, the hour of midnight has come, which means it's no longer Halloween. It hasn't been Halloween for Airplane Lion. Let's not start. And I think it's time I let you all get to your nightmares, and we found somebody to raid. Yeah. It's a downside when you stream so long. Let's read. I never had dinner. Maybe that's why I'm tired and hungry. Oh. Is he online tonight? No. Shoot, as soon as I stopped streaming and started looking for a raid target, I'm like, blah. My brain is broken. Here. Let's raid Cobra Commander, who's playing Shadowgate, Beyond Shadowgate, the sequel. People are very hyped up about Shadowgate. Oh shoot, I forgot to tell you guys. Thank you, Wirebrain, you too. What's coming up on stream? Well, on Wednesday? Shoot. I guess on Wednesday we should play Yeah. Maybe what we'll do is on Wednesday we'll finally finish, they call the Dragon of the West. Oh, Dragon of the West is based on, or Shadowgate is based on Dragon's life. Interesting. But on Wednesday, maybe we'll just finish Blackthorn, because I know we need to. And now we also need to finish Shadow's Price for Our Sins. So what I'm kind of thinking is Wednesday, finish Blackthorn. Sunday, start Nancy Drew, Secret of Shadow Ranch. Maybe we'll do a bonus audiobook stream this week. I'll have to see how I feel and, God, how I can tackle the nightmare with work. After Friday, I don't even want to think about work. And we'll do something for Short Horror Saturday, and yeah, next week we'll pick up with, what's it called? Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. That sounds like a plan to be going on with. There we go. Well, once again, thank you guys for coming to hang out and enjoy a belated Halloween spook fest with me. Realize story, I wasn't as impressed with this story this year as with previous years, but you can't win them all. And I'm glad I got to share that Halloween fan game with you. That was a fun one. I hope that may nightmares and ghosts attend you tonight. Come on the floor. Thank you for the poetry niftiness. Oh yeah, and you guys can find me on Twitter and MySpace, where I post stream announcements and random stuff, and you can find all the VODs of my past streams up on YouTube. I hope that everybody has a good night, happy Halloween, say hi to Cobra Commander, and 11 more months till Halloween, 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 11 more months till Halloween, Silver Shamrock, says Purblind Gamer.